my respect, Hunter. Only one? And that's why we have fire teams. Now you're fighting with heart, Guardian.
That was it.
Double down. Hunters like you blaze a path for the rest of us. The advantage is yours. 2 for 1. Triple down. Fantastic work. Double down. Double down. One after another. 2 for 1. Strength in numbers, Guardian. Excellent. You have my respect, Hunter.
One of the few things I missed about Vanilla D2 was the prevalence of submachine guns in PvP. They are in my opinion one of the most enjoyable archetypes to use besides sidearms. However, since adding special weapons in Forsaken, submachine guns had lost their weight in the meta when comparing them to primaries with a higher ease of use factor, such as hand cannons and auto rifles. But after taking the time to learn the weapon again and observing top players use submachine guns to counter other archetypes, it became quickly apparent to me how effective these guns were still in mid to close ranges. Today I'm going to go over a submachine gun training routine that I've created for Kovaaks that will help improve your efficiency and accuracy with this weapon. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you guys for a really big favor. Please drop a like down below if you enjoyed or learned something new from this video. It really helps me out in the algorithms and allows me to possibly end up in the recommended section of YouTube, therefore being able to help and reach more Guardians. Also, I'll be giving away 2 Model O mouses at 5,000 subscribers, so be sure to smash that subscribe button to enter and ring a notification bell so that you don't miss a video and a chance to win. But regardless, your viewership is enough for me, and I'm grateful for your time and truly hope you guys benefit from this video in some way, shape, or form. When maining a submachine gun, there are some things you have to consider. Your engagements will be from mid to close range, and anything beyond that will have to be compensated by the weapon you choose to pair with it. I know when looking for a god roll, most Guardians look for the roll that has the highest possible range stats, so that they can attempt to have the best of both worlds, which is an SMG that acts like an auto rifle. However, this perception will detriment you in the long run because it will give you false expectations when heading into an engagement. This is because the extra range is there to add a layer of forgiveness if you happen to be slightly outside the intended ranges, rather than trying to push the weapon's limit. The effectiveness of an SMG is truly amplified when in mid to close range encounters, whether your range stat is 50 or 100. Before I get into this training routine, I'll be going over 3 factors that will help you use submachine guns to their fullest potential. Let's begin with movement. As I've stated before, movement is one of the most important factors when it comes to enhancing your PvP performance. Especially when using close quarter combat weapons, you need to close the gap in distance before they become effective. This can be done through selective sliding. Selective sliding is when a player tactically slides into an engagement, putting them in either the blind spot of the enemy or into cover, which will allow them to avoid return fire. Sliding into cover will also give you the opportunity to evade the situation if the encounter is more than you can handle. However, sliding all the time has a disadvantage, being that you will slow yourself down when pursuing the enemy. Yes, you may be able to stay off their radar, but the one time you do pop up and slide again, you will ping the enemy radar, which will give them enough time to predict where you're coming from and set up a counter. That is why I recommend sprinting towards the enemy, and then sliding when the opponent starts pinging your radar. This will give them very little time to set up and react with a counter. If you have teammates around you, slide in their general area to create confusion for the enemy. Also, if both teams are engaging with one another, you can use this opportunity to flank. This is because the opposing team will be too busy aiming down sights, which will create a blind spot or opening to get close enough to fire at an effective range. Now that we are in range, the next thing we have to worry about is, in my opinion, the most important factor when it comes to achieving an extremely fast TTK and killing multiple opponents, which is target acquisition. Like I said in my Kovaak's hand cannon training video, target acquisition is the amount of time between noticing a target and then getting the reticle to that location. This is essentially how fast a player is to get to a target from a resting position, or jump from one target to the next. When using an SMG, being extremely fast at noticing a target, then ADSing when the reticle is centered is crucial to becoming lethal with these weapons. It could mean the difference between a 0.76 time to kill depending on which archetype you're using, and a 1 second time to kill. As long as you hit the first few headshots, the chances of you achieving the optimal TTK will increase significantly. Certus, in my opinion, is one of the best when it comes to target acquisition in Destiny 2. I know that there are other top players in the skill bracket, however, I'm using Certus as an example because he often mains SMGs. As you can see in these clips, Certus is always aiming down sights near the head or on the upper half of the body and never before his target is centered. Centering the target is the act of getting the target to the center of the screen, which will allow you to minimize the amount of adjustment needed to accurately hit the target. This will ensure that most of the bullets in the beginning of the engagement are crits, thus allowing him the upper hand and opportunity to kill the Guardian with ease even if the rest of the shots are to the body. This is especially true when you're in mid to close range because of the huge crit boxes SMGs offer in optimal ranges. That is why getting as close as possible is in your best interest when using CQC type weapons, rather than trying to see how far you can shoot before damage fall off comes into effect. Now that we've snagged the first few crits, we can move on to the next factor when it comes to SMGs, which is tracking. When it comes to SMGs and other rapid-fire weapons, tracking can be broken up into two categories, which are dynamic and static. Dynamic tracking is when your reticle is moving and the target is either in place or in motion. This type of tracking for SMGs is often utilized when the opponent is in shotgun or melee range, thus taking away our maneuverability and forcing us to counter with very little movement. The next type of tracking is static, which is when your reticle is fixed while you and the target are moving. An example of this would be strafing while shooting or sliding into an engagement. You are not adjusting the reticle, instead you are trying to match the speed of the opponent so that your shots land. However, in most scenarios, both types of tracking are used together to a certain degree. For example, if someone is rushing you with a shotgun, you'll still be able to move a couple of meters to the left or right in order to evade the blast. In this short period of movement, you will be able to utilize static tracking to stay locked on to the target. And when you're engaging an opponent while strafing, there is an adjustment period so that your reticle is directly on the head of the opponent. This adjustment period is a form of dynamic tracking. That is why it is important to train these aspects equally in order to be effective when tracking with an SMG. Just like in my last video, we'll be using a method called model aiming, which is to track a huge portion of the model, aka the Guardian, in engagements rather than focusing strictly on the head or reticle. This is because of the bigger than average hitbox Destiny 2 has in general, which essentially means if you aim anywhere from the lower chest to a little above the head in effective ranges, your initial shot is more likely to land as a crit. So with all these factors finally explained, let's get on to this training routine. Before starting this routine, I want you guys to keep some things in mind, which is to make sure your reticle is centered before aiming down sights or firing, and apply model tracking to all of these exercises. There will also be a crit multiplier on 4 out of the 5 exercises, so that tracking the upper half or head of the model should be a priority. Just like for the hand cannons, each exercise will last 5 minutes, totaling 25 minutes, and should be done in the same order presented in the video. If you want extra credit, double up on the time for each exercise, totaling 50 minutes. Also, this routine should be done daily or at least 5 times a week, lasting a 4-week period. Now, let's get started. The first is the D2 SMG Dynamic Target Acquisition exercise. I created this exercise to help build speed and precision when acquiring a target from a resting position. I also wanted to simulate the first few shots of an SMG, being that they are the most important. To perform this exercise, you will always start in the center, which is the resting position, and reset to it every time you finish shooting a target. This is also to help with creating good habits when it comes to centering and live gameplay, being that it is easier to acquire the target when you are starting in a neutral position. Instead of having the reticle rested, aim towards the ceiling or the floor. Please do not spam the weapon, being that it will defeat the purpose of accurately acquiring the target before firing, and also in real scenarios, you will never have an infinite magazine. One more thing guys, if the gun is getting in the way of seeing the target, you can choose to disable the gun's visibility in the options menu under UI. The next exercise we have is the D2 SMG Close Long Strafe Dynamic Tracking. This exercise focuses on tracking a close range target moving in one direction for an extended period. Being that this exercise is dynamic focus, your movement will be limited and there will be a strict focus on horizontal aim. Just like all the other exercises, apply model aiming and aim towards the upper half of the body for the most efficient kill. The D2 SMG Close Fast Strafe dynamic tracking is just like the previous exercise and dynamic focused. The only difference is rather than strafing in one direction for an extended period, the target will be performing random short strafes from left to right. This is to simulate a realistic scenario of a better than average opponent challenging you in close quarter combat. Next is the D2 SMG Long Strafe Static Tracking. This exercise focuses on tracking a medium range target moving in one direction for an extended period. Usually when I do these exercises I would stand still just to focus on horizontal aim. However, SMGs are aggressive weapons that require a lot of movement in order to be effective. This is because you'll be firing the majority of the time when you are trying to close the gap between you and the opponent. This will either be from running or sliding towards them. That is why static tracking will be utilized in this exercise, which means your reticle will be fixed while you and the target are moving. Therefore, the majority of your aiming will be from your keyboard with only minor adjustments from the mouse. Try to match your speed with the target and only ADS to fire when the target is completely centered on the screen. Lastly, we have the D2 SMG Static Pressure Tracking, which is a variant of the Long Strafe Static Tracking. Only difference is the target will be making shorter strafes, not have a head, and will fire back. This is to simulate a live scenario where the target will be evading and firing while you are attempting to close the gap. The focus should be on movement and static tracking while trying to take the target down as fast as possible. Just like the last tracking exercise, try to keep the reticle fixed with a few minor adjustments to the mouse so that the reticle is locked on the head of the target. On a side note, the target in this exercise will have a head in the future. However, right now it is quite difficult to do so because the firing animation happens at the top of the head rather than on the body. So I decided for now the target will remain headless until I figure out how to fix the issue. Regardless though, model tracking should still be applied and tracking the upper half of the body will remain a priority. Now before I wrap things up, I want to state again that consistency with this training routine is the key to success. Just like how Rome was not built in a day, neither is great target acquisition and tracking. You will not see any improvements by just doing this routine a couple of times. Improvements usually start to show at the 2 to 3 week mark and is strictly dependent on whether or not you have kept consistent. And for the final disclaimer, this routine is not the end all be all that will make you a god with SMGs in the Crucible. You can have the best aim ever, but someone with great map knowledge, situational awareness, and better movement will always destroy you in a match. So playing the actual game is needed to improve, just don't solely rely on Kovaaks. That's about all I have for you guys today. I truly hope this helps at least a few Guardians looking to improve their aim and tracking with SMGs. Although they may not be meta at the moment, SMGs in my opinion are one of the most satisfying and fun weapons an aggressive player can use in PvP. If you want to see more videos like this where I go in depth into Kovaak's training specifically for click timing or tracking on D2, please turn on the notification button and subscribe. Thank you again for watching. Peace.